Before I go any further, I'm going to say that I recommend you play this game. It's not all that expensive. The Magic Circle, you can probably get it for like $5 or something. Or you can just wait till a Steam sale or a GOG sale and get it for $5. Hell of a pedigree behind this game. This feels very, very much like a game that a few talented people got together and said, hey, you know what, let's make a game. And then they did. And that's this game. It was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. In fact, even the person who actually put this on the list and almost single-handedly funded this was also surprised by how good this game was. I suppose we'll talk about the gameplay first. But I don't want to. I want to talk about the narrative first. The game starts off and you're going through a thing and then people are interrupting and it's very, very meta-seeming. But it's not actually meta because you're just playing some QA tester or someone who works at the company who's playing through the game and, well, you kind of accidentally your way into some bugs and glitches in the code. I'll get to that in a minute. So then you interact with someone called Pro, who is, we'll get to in a minute, and he starts guiding you on certain things, and there's certain buggy stuff you start doing, and you start kind of moving your way forward, and you see some arguments between someone named Maze and someone named Ish, and both of them seem to have gigantic sticks up their butts in different ways, different angles. And then we move forward and we start to see some slightly freaky stuff, but it's okay because we move forward even further. And we start to actually see what's going on here. If we zoom the camera out a little bit, it's pretty easy to me that what we're looking at is real life plus one. I believe the TV tropes for this is 10 minutes into the future. RoboCop is actually a perfect example of this. Because, well, RoboCop is just real life, except with some very minor changes that push it a little bit further into the future. A little bit more advanced tech in 1, 2, or 3 specific areas and fields so that you can understand and, well, do things that you couldn't do in a real-life setting. In this case, it's the nature of how they run their servers, how they interact with their servers. So, I know this is going to sound shocking, but believe it or not, when you actually design games, you don't put on a VR headset and go into like a virtual Tronscape and design stuff. That's not how that works. But it is here. The people actually do put on headsets and do interface directly, in fact, with the world below. And they actually move through the server space in order to be like, move this here, do that here, all that fun stuff. That's how they design it. That's how they code. That's important because that's also been that way for a bit. That's nothing new. Why is that relevant? First of all, it helps to inform the climax, but more importantly, it helps to explain who Pro is. Science fiction has attached this particular topic several times to some of its own works. We've seen this in Star Trek Voyager, and I had another example, but I've completely forgotten it, where there's a program that's been left running for a little bit too long. Paranoia, the tabletop game. Although that's becoming a video game soon, too. A computer's left running a little bit too long, and it's a little bit too advanced, and it's a bit too immersed, and it just starts to glitch and glitch and glitch and glitch and glitch until, well, I don't want to say that it grows sentience and sapience, but it certainly develops a form of intelligence, an VI, if you will. That's what happens with Pro. This is my interpretation, by the way. This is not codified fact. In fact, if you have an alternate interpretation, I'd love to hear it. In my wildest dreams, it would actually be kind of cool if one of the developers actually hopped in and said, no, you're completely wrong, this is what it was. But either way, what we actually have here is this VI, which has been developing because it's been left in this serverscape, which has been running badly for about a decade. And I do mean badly. This is some serious spaghetti code going on here. They have partially deleted most of the old stuff, but not completely. And they have partially unfinished code strands, which just sit in what I can only refer to as the recycling bin of the server, and in case they might need it. And all of this stuff has been deleted and gone for forever, but it's still there. It's still taking up processing cycles of a sort, and it's still doing its own thing. And that leads to Pro, of course, who is naturally the person who kind of guides us throughout the course of the game because he really just wants to, in his own words, usurp heaven. He wants to undo the gods, which, of course, to him is just the humans who run the server. Sense, mate? So that's our core premise. We're just a tester. We're going through. We're a human, by all accounts. We're going through. And then we find out that Coda, so hang on, let's rewind. The game does the audio log thing. There's the Bioshock vibes coming in. But we also have some good old-fashioned text logs, too. The text logs are actually in the form of interactions between the developers and developer notes, effectively. It's, okay, we'll put this here, and this is a template for this, and I delete this because of this, and so forth and so on. Well, that's neat in its own right. What it actually does is it helps tell the story of the creation of the game that we're playing in the server of testing it. Not the Magic Circle, the game in the game. And so we hear a little bit about that. We find out about it, and we find out through that the story of two major individuals, Maze and Ish, the two voices we heard right at the beginning. Maze was a young and up-and-coming, very talented pro gamer who is violently on the side of story has no place in games. If you manage to kill the Hive Queen, which is actually an optional objective, she gives a rather long speech about how story ruins games. Allow me to professionally disagree. And personally disagree. But that's not the point. The point is it gets across her mentality, her mindset, her perspective, and how she thinks of this. And, well, that's versus gaming in a nutshell, isn't it? Competitive versus or co-op versus or whatever it is. There's a couple of subcategories and sub-branches, but that entire category of gaming is all about the interactions that you have with the other players. Winning, losing, coming out on top, managing a tie, whatever. That's the narrative for you. And that's fine. I say you. Sorry. I shouldn't say you in such an accusatory tone. But you get the point, right? That's the narrative for them. And that's sufficient. And that's her perspective. And that's one of the reasons why she's been banging her head against the walls of these games for 10 years. Because she will never agree with Ish. Now, Ish, you might think he's totally on the story side of things. Actually, no. Ish is a broken and bitter old man. He certainly leans towards the story axis, but he both understands and appreciates the value of gameplay in his game. In fact, most of the things that he brings up that he considers to be negatives or whatever are entirely because of small, specific concerns, usually referring to multiplayer. In one particular instance, he was upset that there was a crouch feature in the game. Why? Because he didn't want people teabagging his creation, the character that he had written for a particular story. That bothered him. So, while he's not a no gameplay person, you could see which side of the axis he leans on. But years and years and years ago, before the first game, before the second game even came out, he and his wife couldn't have a child because he was sterile. We also learned that his wife left him. These are the only factoids we get about this. But we see in his audio logs, the voice acting is fantastic in this game. By the way, there's only 4 actors that I'm aware of. There's a couple of side ones, but there's 4 major actors. And they all do an amazing job. They brought in some great pedigree for this one. Anyways, so, he gets across in his tone that this event broke him. And so he has been clinging to the lifeline of developing this game as a way of forming his own legacy or whatever it is, because this is basically all he's got left. And he has become such an embittered husk, so poisoned by his hope unfulfilled, that he can't move past that. And so all he can see is trying to continue to struggle and fail and struggle and fail, until finally someone metaphorically puts a gun to his head. This is when Coda enters. Now, Coda, this is Ashley Birch's character, she is a little bit psychotic. Just a little bit. Definitely driven. She is the hyper fan, for both good and for bad. She is someone who demands that, she basically shoves her way into position, bribes her way into specific ways to make both Ish and Maze do what she wants, all for the purposes of staging a large stunt on public television, where she is going, or whatever they use, streaming, I don't know. They obviously have streamers. All for the purposes of trying to blackmail Ish into effectively giving up the IP. You are going to make this public domain and we're going to move forward with it. This is when that whole technology thing comes in again. So I mentioned all of them have their own VR stuff, and that's kind of how they operate, and that's cool. But this also applies to how they function. He doesn't say he's going to hand over the IP, and she doesn't demand the IP. It's not like Star Wars. Imagine instead, if you will, that Star Wars was a server somewhere. A physical server that exists in a physical building that has energy and electricity bills and all that fun stuff. But that server is all of Star Wars. Whoever owns that server, they own Star Wars. And it's got all this space, and you get on your goggles, and you go in, and you manipulate stuff. It's like, okay, we're going to make this game here, and we're going to make this story here, and blah, 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 blah. And that's how that operated. That's kind of how it's being presented here. The analogy I kept coming up with was the holodeck over in Star Trek. I know. The holodeck is where you go to do fantastical things, so says the episodes, or to have sex, so says most of the fans, or to save money on budget because it's easier to reuse stuff, say the producers. But all of those people are wrong. Or more accurately, they're all right. But the point is, what is the holodeck really? From an in-universe perspective. The holodeck is the ultimate interface. You could get on the holodeck and you could play video games. Or make video games. Or watch movies, or play movies, or be in movies, or read stories, or listen to music, or compose music, or paint, or anything. Imagine being on a holodeck and you're actually painting with something and you actually do a big screw up. You literally have the ability to say, computer, undo the last brushstroke. You have a Control-Z. The holodeck is the ultimate interface. And from that, once you finish your painting, you could take a picture of it, or tell the computer to take a picture of it, or save the 3D model of it. You get the point? And you get the parallel. That's what this is being presented as. These games and the IPs that they exist within are these holodecks, and that's how they function and operate. So, this one holodeck, that's ownership of this IP for all intents and purposes. Okay, cool. So she demands this. She demands that he make that public domain. This would mean everyone would have admin access to that server. Do you already see the problem there? I was kind of on board with her plan overall. I even made a comment on stream about, if only that worked this way in real life. But the thing is, in this particular setting, public domain doesn't mean everyone can make a Star Wars thing. It means everyone has admin access to the Star Wars server. How do you think that would go? That's exactly how it goes. Everything goes so far to hell that it literally shows the frame rate dropping down to the 1 frame per second range. And before finally we have to reboot and try to salvage something out of this nonsense in order to save the VI Pro that we're trying to assist in this whole thing. And you can put together a little level and he rates it and cool. It's a nice little coda. And then the game hits you in the head with a bunch of stuff. So Ish has a big speech about how players suck. Actually, viewers of fiction is what he's actually referring to. Now, he's also mad and bitter and poisoned and very wrong, as the game itself makes a point of. I was actually going to ding the game for preachiness, except it doesn't actually get preachy, because it goes out of its way to show every side of each perspective, and it goes how to show each side is wrong, just like everyone before about the holodeck. Oh, they all have their right points, of course, but none of them are correct. And that's a distinction. When a character just says something and is shown to be correct, that's leaning into preachy territory, right? Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Point being, that this game is wrong! Oh, sorry. Ooh, had just a bit of a problem there. He has his big speech, and then Coda's like, alright, we did it, we won, we're gonna do this thing, it's gonna be awesome, everything's gonna be amazing, and she freaks out because everyone completely destroys everything in the aforementioned manner, and she doesn't even seem to be able to understand why that's happening, which just says a lot about how much she doesn't understand how people work as an aggregate group. I don't mean that as a negative thing, but have you ever watched the chat room of a stream that has more than 1,000 people in it? I imagine every single one of those people in that chat had admin access to something at the same time. Anyways, so that all wraps up, and then we make a game, and then Pro gets out of it. In the very end, the game is like, hey, congratulations, you're now in charge of development. Welcome to the nightmare. Cut to credits. Although, honestly, the way it presents it is once again more of a challenging thing and not an impossible thing, but, we gotta have her laugh in the last minute there. Let's talk about gameplay. Why did I want to talk about gameplay last? Well, that narrative is okay, but honestly, I'm gonna forget about it in a few days. It's not actually all that great. Oh, it's very well presented, but no points to the plot, and very few points to the sequencing or the structure or anything like that. It's a good story, mostly in how well presented it is. It is very well integrated, very well animated, very well voice acted. Has some good moments, has a good intro, has a good outro. Cool. What's really the meat of this game? So when you start off, you seem to have this mechanic where you can die and interact with things that have been deleted, stuff that's stuck in the memory, as I mentioned earlier, the cache, if you will. Okay, that's our core gimmick, right? Actually, no. In fact, that's such a non-core gimmick. I think it's only used 4 times of any significance. And I actually forgot 2 of those times. I had to look up a walkthrough because I forgot you can ghost, and that's how you're supposed to progress. Anyways, moving on. But that's not the core gimmick. That just gets you forwards. That gets you into the old space, the stuff that's been deleted, and allows you to undelete stuff, pull things out of the recycling bin. Okay, that's an important power and interesting and cool in its own right. And then you gain the ability to set a trap for someone and edit them. I shouldn't say someone, a mob, an object in the game. One of the enemies. It's a stupid little dog thing. We named him Alex Korviniki, of course, per request. And this is the brilliance of this game. I'm so happy that we accidentally ended up playing this game after Tiny and Big. Because this isn't actually a platformer, as I was led to believe. It's twice in 1 week I've been wrong about that. Instead, this is a concept game, exactly like I was talking about back then. The catch is, this is more Portal. Because just like Portal, what this game does is it gives you its concept, its gimmick, and then it runs with it. So the way this works is you can edit an enemy. All the enemies in the entire game. And when you edit them, you can change what they consider to be an ally, including you, of course, what they consider to be enemies, their name, their method of movement, their method of attack, and any special abilities they have. You can also up their stats and make it so that you can physically pick them up. Now that's it. But just like Tiny and Big, that's a great gimmick. But if they didn't do anything with it, well, that wouldn't mean anything. But, again, to carry it back, instead they pulled a Portal, and they designed the entire game around this mechanic. I can't even begin to summarize the possibilities here. One of the big armies that I created was an army of flying rocks, all of whom were armed with railguns, which would instantly kill anything that tried to attack me and a couple specific enemies, and we're also fireproof while we're on the subject, and I think there was a few other things I'm missing there. That is only one possibility of what you can do. This is what I like to call build gameplay, where there's lots of different specific types of builds that alter and change how you play through it, and each build is, within reasonability, viable. So you start off small, just the one dog, and you edit it around, you give it some stats, and that's cool. But as you progress, you find another enemy. Now you can keep that enemy, or you can take all of its attributes, and that becomes your inventory. You have 1 ground movement, 1 melee movement, and 1 ability to be fireproof. You can split that up amongst your 2, or just buff the 1 if you want to. And then you move forward again. You find a new enemy, and a new enemy, and a new enemy. And you get the concept. Virtually each new enemy gives you something new that you can work with, and each new enemy gives you more possibilities. And this also allows you to build wide, having a large group of doing whatever, or to build tall, put everything onto a single unit, and have that one unit be death. Now, I was actually kind of building tall at first until I realized that, I should probably be able to name some of these people after viewers, so we got a viewer army going together. And then, well, this is where the other aspect of game design, I talk so much about this lately. Game systems have to complement each other. So we have a cool mechanic. The interface for it is excellent. It is very intuitive. In fact, I'm just going to say this bluntly, rip off this idea someday if I ever make games, because there's a Lich Army game I've been wanting to make for years, and this is just exactly how that works, right? Okay, edit this unit, and kind of stylize the AI of each unit so you don't have to micromanage every single unit, and then you just run around and control them. You can summon them to you from anywhere on the map, by the way, even if they're dead, by the way. You can cycle between them to change and edit them. You can swap abilities and concepts and attacks and all that stuff between them, and you can pick them up and throw them, and just there is so much you can do with that. But hang on. So we've got good controls. We've got a good core mechanic. We've got a large variety of kit. The toolkit is fairly substantial, right? In fact, the way I killed the Securitron, which is where you get the railgun from, I sent a dinky little thing after it with the Parasite ability, which I gotten earlier. What that means is as soon as this unit dies, the thing that kills it gets infected with the Parasite, which then does dot damage dot damage over time, really. Does dot damage. And I guess I should say damage over time. I'm kind of tired. I was supposed to be in bed 40 minutes ago. This is a late stream. Anyways, damage over time. And then once it actually dies, well, it spawns more. Now, that was a problem I had to deal with, but it's easier to deal with those damn worms than the Securitron and its freaking railgun. So now I had a Securitron and a railgun. What's funny is the other thing that the game does, and this is the biggest one, is the level design and the enemy placement and the object placement and the flow of progression. So what happens, rewind a little bit. So you see your little intro and you get your ghost ability and then you walk forward and you see your first enemy. And then you do a couple of things. You go through an old section, you free the dude, you get up. By this point, you'll probably have 3 enemies or 1 you've been buffing. And then you get to see Coda in her avatar that she's using to interact with the interface, to interact with the server. And you're just staring at that like, okay, And that's your goal. That's it. Kill that avatar, and then you will progress to the end of the game. That's all you have to do. The level design, enemy placement, and progression, it all has, God, at least 15 different ways you can go through it. This is what I like to refer to as all roads lead to Rome game design. You're always going to end up there. You're always going to kill her. But the way you get there is entirely up to you. I did get a little lost a couple times. Actually, I already referenced this because I forgot about the ghost mechanic, and that's on me. Like, there's this lava pit. How do I get across the lava pit? Just kill yourself and walk across it. The ghost isn't affected by lava. Oh, yeah. But other than that, at all times, I felt like I could decide however I wanted to get through anything. The game even tells you this. If you think there's an intended solution, screw that. You figure out your own solution. And that's exactly what I did consistently. The best part is, as you go further, the game kind of snowballs a bit. As you get more abilities and more stuff, you tend to your way through things. This really hit ahead for me when I killed the Hive Queen. Now, apparently there's at least 3 ways to kill this thing that I'm aware of. And that's just from looking up a couple of walkthroughs because I was curious. I ended up killing it by sending my Securitron into the door and letting it railgun her to death in 2 hits. But once you get that, you get the all-important linked mine or whatever it is ability. This is the moment you are death. The way this works is you put this on a specific unit. And that unit and every other unit of its type, all rocks or all dogs or all hives or whatever that type of unit, all other enemies of that type gain everything from them, all their stat boosts, all of their abilities. So if you put your only railgun, remember you only have one of those because it's inventory, you put your 1 railgun on that rock, all your rocks have railguns. You have 1 flight, you get it. And so you can spread out all of that across your entire army in whatever direction you wanted to. There's a lot of corpses in the game, by the way, so I imagine the most numerically speaking thing you could do is just have a massive army of flying corpses with whatever ability you want to give them. And there's a lot of possibilities for that. So, good interlinking systems, a wonderful build, and actually taking a concept and running with it. I didn't rate this quite as highly as Portal, because Portal is Portal, but this is still a fantastic game. Purely even just on the gameplay axis, but still enjoyable on the narrative one. I do recommend you still play it, even if you've listened to me at this point and you haven't played it at this point. I do recommend giving it a look. But either way, I do, as always, hope you've enjoyed my thoughts, and I'll see you next time for hopefully an actual platformer.